All right. Again, no different than the other. Because of time, we need to kind of run our way through it. Ignore citric acid at the moment. Let's get through some basic terminology. So just a reminder of a couple of things. Make sure you know what an endergonic versus an exergonic reaction is. Make sure you understand that most times endergonic and exergonic reactions are not married but coupled. So, having said that, you can see one of the stages here, but what are the energy stages in animal cellular respiration? The very first is glycolysis. The second is Krebs or citric acid. And then the third is the electron transport chain. Now, what I want you to be aware of, and I believe that we've eliminated all the questions on the test that are like this, but for your edification, there is technically 4 stages to cellular respiration within animals. After glycolysis, but before Krebs, is an intermediate stage in which pyruvic acid is converted to acetyl-CoA. In most cases, the way that he has defined it in your lectures, he is basically joining glycolysis and concluding with the intermediate stage. So, if you see a question for whatever reason that says something like how many stages are there, and then 3 and 4 are readily apparent, you know that I'm going to be there. You need to tell me so that I can go look at the question and make sure that we have the correct answer. Because technically there are 4, you've been taught 3 of them. Okay? Glycolysis, Krebs, another word for Krebs, citric acid, electron transport chain. So, can anybody tell me what at the conclusion, well, what are the 2 steps of glycolysis? Again, without looking at the slide because that's Krebs, the 2 steps are this. Energy is used to make adjustments so that a 6-carbon molecule can be split evenly. Additionally to that, within glycolysis, ATP and NADH are produced. So in short, at the conclusion of glycolysis, before the intermediate step, before Krebs, your production is 2 CO2s, 2 NADHs, 2 acetyl-CoAs.
What was the second step? Glycolysis.
It's just a reminder that ATP and NADH are produced.
Okay.
I should have said steps. What are 2 noteworthy events that occur? All right. So, glycolysis production being done or almost done, depending on how you look at it. The only other step is that we need to convert the pyruvic acid to acetyl-CoA. All right? So that's that intermediate step, which you can either incorporate into glycolysis or is called the intermediate step. But we need it to be converted from pyruvic acid to acetyl-CoA before we enter the Krebs cycle. Okay? So, this is an image, and I like handwriting better anyway, but this is an image from the Khan Academy, which I find to be useful. So let's kind of go over some very basic things that happen inside of the Krebs cycle. Two pyruvate molecules, or acetyl-CoAs produced during glycolysis, are transported to what part of a cell? smart part, the mitochondria, for actual cellular respiration. The molecule, the acetyl molecule, is then picked up by a CoA coenzyme. When I say that, that's right here, the coenzyme right there. Okay? That is specifically in the matrix. Specifically, if you were to break it down, that is actually in the matrix of the mitochondria. Then it goes through a process of energy production. I would memorize this. This slide, not specifically, but if you want to look at it, it's up there. You can write that part down. Citric acid cycle on the Khan Academy. It's a little more straightforward, but you need to know this one. So what results from the Krebs cycle? For each turn of the cycle, 2 carbon dioxide molecules are released. 2 turns are required to process 1 glucose molecule. For each turn of the cycle, 3 NADH molecules, 1 ATP, and 1 fructose energy molecule are created. So, we know how many cycles does it take. If for 1 glucose, if somebody sits there and writes a question, and I guarantee it will be written in some way. If somebody sits there and says, I have 1 glucose molecule at the very beginning of glycolysis, you should be able to quickly discern how many turns of Krebs does it take to get through that. 2. On the other hand, if somebody says, what is the production of 1 turn of Krebs, be very careful there too that you're not doubling it up. Okay? You will see some sort of question about that, and it will be not meant to trick you, but meant to make you think. Are you dealing with the whole molecule to start as it came through glycolysis, or are you actually just talking about a single turn, a single revolution of Krebs? So in short, your production in Krebs is like this. So you know you have 1 glucose becomes 2 acetyl CoA, right? So we know therefore that there's going to be 2 revolutions of Krebs. So with each revolution, we can see here that we are creating 1, 2, and at 9 o'clock, 3 NADH. We can see here as well ATP. They call it GTP. All right. So here you've got your ATP coming out at approximately 6 o'clock, and then the FADH, the fructose energy, coming out at approximately 7 or 8 o'clock. So again, we know that there's 1 and 1. So that's 1 cycle, so that we can assume that the other cycle is going to produce the same. So our total for 2 cycles would be 6 NADH, 2 fructose high energy, and 2 ATP. I realize that that looks overly simplistic, guys, but again, I'm telling you that it's an easy question to miss. It should be a perfectly easy question to answer. So, at the end of the Krebs cycle, what's the next stage called? stage is the electron transport chain. This is where the bulk of your ATP is generated. Do we know how much ATP actually occurs there?
No.
No, we do not. If somebody were to ask you or give you a specific number on a question on the test, you might want to raise your hand and ask me and be absolutely clear. Because we know that it'll be approximately 32 to 36 pieces of ATP, but we don't know exactly, unlike the other cycles, the other processes in cellular respiration. What is the, what actually occurs in the electron transfer chain? Does anybody remember the term? Oxidative phosphorylation. Very good. So what occurs during oxidative phosphorylation? Oxygen is accepted by the electrons, and the energy of the electrons is harvested and used to create energy, ATP. Very good. All right, so just to make sure that we are absolutely certain on all this, make sure you remember these numbers. What I've defined there over on the right writing board is 2 cycles of Krebs. Okay, but in reality, there are other steps before that, as we know, glycolysis. And in the process of glycolysis, we know that there is a product or a production of 2 ATPs. We know that Krebs also produces 2 ATPs in addition to other forms of energy. And then, as we just discussed, we know that the ETC actually produces somewhere between 32 and 38 ATPs. The book actually tells you 32, basically indicating that there's a 36 maximum. Good. Okay, lovely. Remember what OL-RIG stands for. Oxidation is less, reduction is greater. Remember endergonic, exergonic reactions. So if I were to basically give you a cycle of energy in everyday life, something to think about, energy from food is required to push a third phosphate onto ADP. Okay? Energy from the food is then stored as a phosphate bond in what is now ATP. Energy is then released when the phosphate bond is broken and can be used as the actual fuel of our everyday lives. Okay? So that is a very simple explanation of how our body uses energy, how it stores it, how it consumes it, and that's why it's all in ATP. There are other forms of high energy, as we know. However, ATP is the central focus. For each molecule of glucose, how many molecules of pyruvic acid are formed? 2, exactly. What does the intermediate step do with the pyruvic acid?
Converts to CoA.
What does it become?
CoA.
Huh? Acetyl CoA. Okay. What happens if oxygen is not present to accept the electrons from the electron transport chain?
Cellular respiration.
Look. Cellular respiration.
Fermentation.
Fermentation, very good. I I'm not going to get into fermentation. You guys can look it up basically, but that's the very short answer of it, okay? Also remember that the energy harvesting basically comes to a stop at that point too. What types of food can be broken down through cellular respiration? Pretty much any type of food. Proteins, carbohydrates, fats. Okay? Proteins, another word for proteins, amino acids. Carbohydrates, sugars, fats, glycerols, and fatty acids. What I want you to remember about the fatty acids is that fatty acids are the only type that do not use glycolysis. It jumps directly to the Krebs cycle. Okay, let's do some body. I hope they weren't bored. Maybe they were just tired. I've never had people walk out. I always leave that to him to let people walk out of class. People walk out of his classes all the time. What's that?
That's true.
Well, how would you know? You're asleep most of the time.
I know. That's all right. It was only that one time.
Said only that one time.
Only that one time.
What is anatomy? Anatomy is the body's internal and external structure as well as the physical relationship between the body's parts. What is physiology? Physiology is what?
How the parts work.
Exactly. The study of how the parts work. How does the body regulate itself? Homeostasis would be one. Can we name any others? Homeostasis regulates, excuse me, now you got me saying it. The body regulates itself through a system of circular controls. Remember all the different systems working together? And it also responds to positive and negative feedback. Al, the stove is on and it's hot. Negative feedback. And then, of course, as we've already said 100 times, homeostasis. What are the two primary body cavities of human beings? Don't say front and back. Dorsal and ventral. Which one is in the back? Dorsal. Just remember a dolphin or a shark's dorsal fin. Remind yourself as you get to this section of the exam or start thinking, make sure that you're focused on the hierarchy again. Organelles, cells, organs, organ systems, organisms. Don't have to go any further than that when you're dealing with human anatomy, but you do need to know those pieces again. All right, so the hierarchy is useful. What are the 4 different tissue types in human beings? Epithelial, connective, muscular, nope. Nervous. Got it. 4. So what is epithelial tissue? Skin. It is the tissue that covers all body surfaces exposed to an external environment. Could we say that the stomach has an epithelial tissue? Yes, we could. The tissue, epithelial tissue protects, it secretes, and it absorbs. However, as Mandy said up front, what is the easiest way to remember epithelial tissue? Look at the skin that you're wearing. All right. As I recall, and somebody will have to tell me if it was in the book, there was no lecture. It was totally ripped apart as far as the breakdown of different epithelial tissues. Is that correct? Nobody got into cuboidal or simple. Okay. And I'm not even going to blow your mind with that one. So just know that there's a whole bunch of different types of epithelial tissue. All right, so let's go on to connective tissue. Connective tissue supports and protects other tissues. Connective tissue cells are embedded in a material or extracellular matrix, which they themselves secrete. So what are the best examples of connective tissue?
Blood.
Bones. What is another one? What is another one that is easy to remember, easy to forget, and will show up on an exam? Blood is a connective tissue. Third, of course, would be the cartilage that we often see interspersed within our bodies. So what are the different types of connective tissue in order of strength? We can assume the most dense, the strongest form of connective tissue would be our bone. All right? But let's go in order. So the first one you have is collagenous fiber. That's actually before blood. Blood is the second. The third is fibrous connective tissue. Then the fourth is cartilage. And then the fifth is adipose tissue. And then, of course, as we've already discussed, the sixth is bone. I might spend a few minutes making sure that I can put those in order. I feel pretty comfortable that there will be at least one question, random question, about the order of whether it's the correct order or not. Sure. Collagenous, C-O-L-L-A-G-E-N-O-U-S. Collagenous or loose fiber. Blood is number 2. Fibrous connective tissue is number 3. Cartilage is number 4. Adipose, A-D-I-P-O-S-E, tissue is number 5. Bone is number 6. Good? Muscular, what?
I'm so sorry, can you do it one more time?
Sure. Collagenous fiber, blood, fibrous connective, cartilage, adipose, bone. All right, muscular. Let's keep going here. We got to get our way through this. What types of muscular tissue are there? There's 3 of them. Smooth is one. Cardiac is another. Who said it? Skeletal. Very good. Okay, so skeletal, smooth, and cardiac. Probably the only thing noteworthy, you should be able to discern what all those are. Just remember that the cardiac is only dealing with the heart. Okay? What are the nervous tissues? Nervous tissues are specialized for the rapid conduction of electrical impulses. Very good. What are the 2 basic types of cells? I got a bunch of psych majors here. One is the road and one is the car on the road. No. 2 basic types. I'm sorry, we're still on brain. Neurons. And neurons travel through what supports with the transmission? The glial cells. Okay? What does the respiratory, I know I'm bouncing around here, but what does the respiratory system do? It moves something in and takes something out. Did you say out oxygen? Okay. Here we go. All right, oxygen in, CO2 out. What does the cardiovascular system do? Pumps blood is probably the very simple answer. How about we get a little more technical and we say that it transports materials for the rest of the body to and from all the other systems? What does the digestive system do? Transforms food into a form that can be transported throughout the body and used as energy. What does the urinary system do? I assume we know that one. And what is noteworthy of all the body systems? All systems work together, and they require one particular system, the circulatory system. You have to have the circulatory system. So therefore, blood is the true transportation system of the body. Why do human beings have circulatory systems? All except for Miguel, who has a vascular bundle. We are not small organisms, we are complex, and we cannot use diffusion to transport, so we have to have a circulatory system. Are circulatory systems necessary in all animals? No. What other circulatory systems are there? We have the open circulatory system. We often see it in insects. There is no clear distinction between the circulatory fluid and the interstitial fluid. The mixture, therefore, is called, can anybody remember? Hemolymph. H-E-M-O-L-Y-P-H. When you see a bug splat on your car windshield, it's not red, it's not white, it's a mix. That would be hemolymph. What type of circulatory system do we have? Very good. The basic way to remember closed is that we have vessels. We have veins, we have arteries. Okay? What makes up the cardiovascular system? The heart, which is the pump, the body's blood vessels, which I just said were the arteries and the veins. The blood itself is kind of important. And where is the blood formed? How is red blood cells made? Bone marrow. So bone marrow makes up the rest of the cardiovascular. So if somebody were to ask you about the different features, you would remember that it isn't just the heart that is the cardiovascular system, that there's a whole part of it. What substances are transported through the circulatory system? Oxygen, we know. Carbon dioxide, we know. Those are easy. Nutrients, vitamins, hormones, waste product. A different type of blood cell is also transported, which is our immune system, the white blood cell, and enzymes, proteins. All right. What are the two primary components of blood?
Plasma
Plasma and red blood cells is part of the other one. We call that the formed elements. And the formed elements would be your red blood cells, your white blood cells, and your platelets. Why are platelets important? Because they clot. They clot our blood so that our blood just doesn't keep spilling out when we have a baby cut. So if anybody has ever known a cancer victim, when you take radiation or chemotherapy, it lowers your immune system and you lose platelets, which is why it's important. And platelets, by the way, have a shelf life, I think, of about 24 hours. So that's why it's important to give platelets if you have the time and are able to do it, because cancer victims need it constantly to allow for the clotting of their blood. What is the rough percentage of makeup of these formed elements versus plasma? 55, 45. 55 plasma, 45 formed elements. What is the makeup of plasma? What is the makeup of plasma? Water and protein. Very good. We did white blood cells. I did a nice little story on that. We do understand the concept. I shouldn't have to go over too detail, but red blood cells carry oxygen and CO2. That's one of their major purposes. We talked about platelets. We talked about, what is the percentage of red versus white? Roughly 1 in 1,000, so 99.9 red, 0.1 white. Don't get that confused with any of the other percentages. You will see a percentage question, guaranteed. Think it through. What is the makeup of plasma? 92% water, 7% plasma, proteins, and 1% extraneous solutes. What are the three primary classes of plasma proteins? Guarantee it's going to pop. Albumins, fibrogens, globulins. Okay? The only way that I can remember that or give you an answer to that one is work yourself backwards. If it's asking for plasma proteins, if there's any question relevant to that, and the way you can think, or what one of them are, the way you can think about it is this. Go to fibrogen in your mind, think fiber, think a piece of clothing perhaps, fiber, or a material or fiber, fabric, whatever, and that aids in clotting. Go to globulins, think that, what was that, Metamucil, that little globby monster that you take the cold Mucinex, think globulin there, monster, therefore globulins are there to fight off, to help the immune system, and therefore that leaves you with albumins, which transport hormones and fatty acids. All right, what are the two transport proteins important to the health of the heart? One is up here, one is down here. One is high, one is low. High density and low density lipoproteins. Low density lipoproteins carry lipids to the bodily tissues from the liver. High density lipoproteins carry lipids from the tissues to the liver. So, quick reminder there, low out, high in. All right, I guess we are actually at one term real quick. Just remember that the pulmonary circulation, the two blood circulatory loops are pulmonary and systemic. Pulmonary is your lungs, so it's the communication or the transfer of blood back and forth between your lungs and your heart. Systemic is the blood circulating from the heart to the rest of the body. Okay? So, we are on the third term. Let's do it if I can. R A V L L A V. I've told this story countless times. It drives me nuts, especially nursing students, when they sit there and start drawing out the chambers of the heart to try to figure out what's doing what. This is a very simple way to remember everything. So when you get into the exam, before you forget what it means, write it down. Go for it. Tell me. Right? Atrium. Ventricle. Lungs. Left. Atrium. Ventricle. If you can know that, then you can basically discern everything that's going to go on from there. Which is, deoxygenated blood is carried to the heart by the veins. That would be everything. Deoxygenated. Low oxygen blood. Deoxygenated blood is carried to the heart by the veins. It enters the heart in the right atrium, which therefore is the first chamber of the heart. It moves to the right ventricle, which is therefore the second chamber of the heart. Don't forget there's a double L in here. It's deoxygenated, so it has to go get oxygen from somewhere, so it's going to go to the lungs. Okay? So it exits, blood moves to the right ventricle. Deoxygenated blood then exits the heart by an artery. There is a gas exchange in the lungs. CO2 goes out. O2 comes in. We now are high oxygen blood again, but now we have to get back to the body, so we have to get back to the heart first. So we come back into the pulmonary system into the left atrium, which is the third chamber of the heart, and then we will go through the fourth chamber, which is the left ventricle. Okay? So that's one thing to remember about Rab Lab that makes it a little easy to put together what's going what, or easier, I should say. You guys had that question. Did you still have that question where you have to actually place it? No? Yes? Anybody know what I'm talking about? Oh, dear. I hated that question because if you missed just one of them, you had to place like all 10 steps or something, 9 steps. And even if you knew RavLab, if you just missed one or if it moved on you, you had to start the whole question over again. I think I got like 4 out of 5, like 27 times on it until I realized that it was moving after I placed it. But I think he got rid of that question. It's a good question though.
Is the L in the middle lungs?
Huh?
Is the L in the middle lungs?
Yeah.
Alright.
Right atrium ventricle, lungs, left atrium ventricle. Okay? So, with this information, we now have gone through deoxygenation to oxygenation. We now have gone through, if I were to ask you a question, say, which chamber pumps blood into the pulmonary system? You could tell me that it would be the right ventricle. If I were to ask you which chamber pumps out to the systemic system, you could tell me that it is the left ventricle. You could also probably discern, even though I haven't given you the answer, you could probably guess which of the chambers is the strongest.
Like when it comes to the body, the systemic.
What?
The systemic.
Which is what?
Through the whole body.
Yes, so therefore, which chamber has to be to have the strongest pump? That could be the right. The right. You kept saying right. The left is the strongest. It has to be, because it has to go down through all the body. Okay? All right. Does anybody have any questions about RavLab? Good. Here we go. What causes heart attacks? Blockages? Oh, yeah, he did ask a question about heart attacks on one final. So, what causes heart attacks? Blockages are generally caused by a buildup of plaque in the wall of a coronary artery, but it is actually the movement of the plaque into the bloodstream that is what causes the heart attack. Okay? Because it is actually when it breaks apart and starts going through that it forms a blood clot. Remember that because it's kind of a iffy question. Respiratory system. Lungs, nose, nasal cavity, sinuses, pharynx, larynx, trachea. Okay? You want to do the, I'll get that device. You take like a flap?
No, the upper part of the throat is called
He did ask that question about that? No, he gave you all credit on that one. That was a give back. So that was a question. He gave it all back.
You had said it in the earlier session.
I did. I wouldn't have gone any further than that. I mean, the upper throat is the pharynx. That's oh, the pharynx. Okay. Right. The upper throat is the pharynx. Apparently, it was a test question. Yes, Emma?
You had said something earlier, and I didn't catch what you were talking about, but you said oxygen, carbon dioxide, nutrients, vitamins, hormones, white blood cells, enzymes, proteins, they're transported through, is it blood?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oxygen, carbon dioxide, nutrients, vitamins, hormones, waste products, immune system cells, i.e. white blood cells, and proteins. Sorry, Mandy, I didn't understand what you were asking. All right, so the pharynx is the upper throat, the larynx is the voice box, and the trachea is the windpipe. The other element inside of the respiratory system are the bronchi and the bronchioles that lead to the... Very good. Where does gas exchange actually take place? What? Capillaries. What does oxygen bind to in the red blood cells?
Hemoglobin.
Hemoglobin. What is a hemoglobin? It's a type of... Very good. What are the two transportations of carbon dioxide vehicles? Red blood cells. And what else actually transports some carbon dioxide? Plasma. What else does hemoglobin have great capacity to bind to? Don't get mixed up. If you see it, the one that starts with an M, not with a D, carbon monoxide. That's why we all, if like this room were being filled with carbon monoxide, we would all just go to sleep because our bodies would say, oh, this is lovely. We're still able to do this, and yet it's bad. And when I say go to sleep, I would mean go to sleep permanently. Did we do Bohr effect in class? In Starling's law? Well, let me just go over it. Bohr effect, B-O-H-R. Bohr effect is a decrease in the amount of oxygen associated with hemoglobin in response to a lowered blood pH balance resulting from an increased concentration of carbon dioxide in the blood. Remember the little squares, the little box things he had with the 1, 2, 3, 4 little red blood cells? The point of the Bohr effect, and the thing that you need to focus on and remember, is the fact that basically it says that we're not going to use, it continues in principle to say that we're not going to use all of the blood, all of the oxygen within each hemoglobin. We're going to try to keep it even and keep it high. Unless you're under physical exertion, start running 20 miles, and at the 4th or 5th mile, at that point your hemoglobins are really, really sucking down and using as much oxygen as they can. All right? The Starling's law says that when more blood enters the heart, the stronger the pump out of the heart. Okay? Digestive system. What are the core functions of the digestive system? To break down the foods that the body ingests, to transfer nutrients, to retain waste, to eliminate that waste. I would like you to, there is a slide that I am not going to go heavily into, but there is a slide, this should be your 6th slide that you should really look at. And it's got a picture of a little man on there, and then it points to his open stomach, and it shows the small intestine and the anatomy of the small intestine. That would be something I would want you to have some knowledge of, most specifically the microvilli, where nutrients are absorbed, the mucosa, the submucosa, the muscularis externa, and the serosa. All right, I'm not going to get into that. We don't have that much time. So, but that's a slide. That would be another slide that you need to have out, study, practice, and have some anatomy understanding of it. You don't have to know every single detail of the digestive system, but you have to know enough about where the sphincters are, what allows what stops what, so on and so forth. The very general gist of the digestive system from here is we know where does digestion start? Perfect. Chewing and the enzymes to start to break down food, digestion starts in the mouth. When you swallow, there is an automatic reaction where something covers up the windpipe, the epiglottis. And you can actually have a disease where the epiglottis doesn't close over, and then your food goes into your lungs. Not a good thing. From there, it arrives in the stomach. The stomach is noteworthy because it is the opening part of the digestive system at the base of your body, or in the base at the lower part of your body after you've gone through the esophagus. And what I want you to remember there is that last one, choo-choo. What I want you to remember there is that the stomach is where what breaks down the most. Psych majors, alcohol and drugs break down most inside of the stomach. Okay? Some of it goes on to the small intestines, but most of it, that's why we know when we take an aspirin, it has pretty steady effects. Okay? From there, we go to the small intestines. The small intestines is, in fact, where 80% of your digestion occurs. And then we go on to the large intestines. The large intestines does have very minimal digestion, but its primary purpose is to take the remaining physical substance, compact it, retain it, and try to get as much water out of it as possible so that the body doesn't have to continue to hydrate itself. It is the large intestine, therefore, could be considered a form of homeostasis. Okay? The retention of water. Again, I want you to know your small intestine anatomy. Specifically, if you want to write it down, the duodenum, which is the entry to the small intestine that receives chyme from the stomach and secretions from the pancreas and liver. The jejunum of the small intestine, which is the region where most digestion and nutrient absorption takes place. The ileum, there is some additional absorption at this point. Within the ileum is the good bacteria that assist with the breakdown. We have good bacteria in us, and sometimes some of us actually take good bacteria, which is what would be an example of probiotics. Okay, what does the gallbladder do? It stores the liver's bile, B-I-L-E, bile production for later use in the breakdown. What is bile breakdown? What's the most difficult thing to break down? Lipids, fats, very good. Wherever it came from. But what actually produces bile? The liver. Why do we have a gallbladder? Because the production of bile consumes a great deal of energy. So our body likes to do it while we're resting. Everybody does know what bile is, right? One sick night, that'll do it to you. All right, large intestines. Okay, and then we did no calories or anything, did we? You removed all that. So just very quickly, what is a nutrient? A nutrient is a substance contained in food that does at least one of three things. It provides energy. It provides a structural building block for the body. And it regulates a process within the body. There are 6 classes of nutrients: water, minerals, vitamins, and then the other 3 we should know right off the top: proteins, carbohydrates, and lipids. Ladies and gentlemen, that is section 3. Can I keep going? Can we take a break?